What's good, and howdy, students. Believe it or not, we are on session 3, which means we are halfway through the semester. How are you feeling, everybody?
It feels pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It is pretty crazy. Yeah, I've been thinking about those 5 tips from our last session that Melissa Kruger gave us. I think they're really helpful. I've been thinking about them a lot in my own life.
Yeah, honestly, me too.
Speaking of thinking about things that, apply to our lives, something I was thinking about is our conversation earlier in the semester, actually in the first session.
Okay, what's that?
I was thinking about the acronym that we had shared at the end, the TAPS one, which was teaching, application, practice, and sharing. Mm-hmm. I know that the first 2, teaching and application, are kind of like easy. I feel like we do those regularly. That's like a part of like Sunday school and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like practice and sharing are things that are kind of new to us. And I was wondering if we could maybe tease those out over the next couple of sessions.
Yeah, I think that is a great idea, Caleb. Because for me, with my faith, I think when I was younger, I think I really took for granted the fact that I can grow stronger at my faith. I can grow closer to Jesus through practices. That was really something that I didn't lean into. I didn't really learn that much about until I was a lot older.
I'm hoping that maybe today we could open up our Bibles and talk about some of the passages where Jesus says, hey, follow me. It's going to be hard. Being my disciple is going to be hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start.
Okay, so my first verse is this, Matthew 16:24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. So right there, it sounds like Jesus is saying being a disciple is hard work. Jesus is saying that being a disciple is someone who, first off, is disciplined. They deny themselves. I mean, just think about how those words compare together. Discipline and disciple. It's like the same word.
Yeah, I've never thought of that before, but that's true. In the word disciple, or in the word discipline is the word disciple. Those things are related to each other because being a disciple, it is a discipline. And we all kind of intuitively know that, right? If you want to be passionate about something and you want to pursue it, it takes practice, it takes work, it takes discipline. You have to deny yourself in certain areas in order to become an expert or to have mastery over something that you care about.
Right.
And discipline isn't always like for things that are just like work related. My favorite thing to do from middle school all the way through college was to run. I ran track and cross country for several years, and it was my favorite thing. It was so life-giving. I made some of the best friendships I've ever had in my life, but it was a lot of work. I would have to wake up at 4 a.m. a lot of mornings to go on morning runs or to do interval training, oftentimes by myself, sacrificing precious sleep. And that was hard. But that's discipline. That is like required in order to do well, in order to improve as an athlete. Making those sacrifices was.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, very impressed. I would never wake up at 4 a.m. for anything.
Agreed.
Maybe if you told me there was a bowl of Reese's Puffs outside, I could maybe roll out of bed and then roll back into bed after. But yeah, I think what you're describing is super helpful because you're talking about, you're having to deny yourself, but it's in order to attain something else. And that's really what Jesus is describing. If you look at the second half of that verse in Matthew chapter 16, verse 25, it says, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. So Jesus is saying, if you want to find yourself, you can, but it takes work. You have to deny some parts of who you are in order to become the person I made you to be. So it doesn't come naturally. It takes work. It takes discipline.
And part of that work, dude, is like learning more about who Jesus is. Like he's not with us physically. I have to read the Bible. I have to learn more. I have to see how he interacted with people, how he reacted to different situations. Because otherwise I won't know who he is. And to be honest with you, that's also work. That's also taxing to some degree.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of talking about the knowing him part. Because for example, let's say I tell you, I am devoted to my husband and I love him, which is true.
Good.
I love Matthias and I'm very devoted to him. And so then you ask, okay, well, what do you love about him? But let's say I tell you, well, I love that he played football in college. I love that he has beautiful brown eyes. And I love that he absolutely never wears hats. What would you say to that?
I would say you probably don't know Matthias
Does
at
he
all.
have a twin somewhere we don't know about?
Yeah, exactly, because he actually played hockey in college. Fun fact if you didn't know that. He has hazel eyes, not brown eyes. And he is always wearing a fantastic hat. So if I didn't know these things about him, and if I didn't know anything about him, you would really probably start to question, are you actually devoted to him? Do you really know him?
Yeah, even the idea of being discipled by someone who walked the earth 2,000 years ago in a different culture, in a different time, and a different place, if you're saying, I'm a disciple of that person, I want to imitate that person, well, it's going to take you a lot of work to get from where you are here to imitating that person. So this is actually something I learned last year. There's a guy named Rodney Stark. He's a sociologist, and he focuses on the life of the early church. And one of the things that was really surprising to me in one of his books is he talks about how something that is very conspicuous about the early church that's very different from other religions is that they are very literate. So they're passing around tons of pounds of letters and manuscripts and books. And so you just have this huge spread of literature all over the Greco-Roman Empire, because they understood even back then, having lived in Jesus' time and place, that to imitate this man, they're going to have to do their study, right? They're going to have to work. They're going to have to study. They're going to have to read. They're going to have to do that together. And so the early Christians were extremely studious.
That's actually really helpful, Nicholas. Just like keeping in mind the fact that being a disciple takes discipline. It takes being studious and studying things, even though I know our students are like, please don't tell me to add one more thing to my homework schedule. But I want to also hone in on the fact that he says, like right there in the middle of the verse, take up your cross daily. Daily? that's kind of hard. That's and not in a cool way. That's hard, difficult, and a little like frustrating to think about, because to be honest with you, following Jesus doesn't come as natural as I want it to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually so difficult, like you're talking about, that most people who Jesus calls are actually going to say no. That's what Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 7. In verses 13 and 14, he says, enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it.
Right. So Jesus is saying that like not following him is like gravity. That's what's natural to us. It's just inertia. At least it feels natural. It feels natural to blow off reading our Bible every single day and instead looking at social media every single day. It feels natural to listen to what we hear from our friends or our teachers who are believers of God, rather than to listen to our Sunday school teachers or our parents or our friends who do believe in Jesus. It feels natural. Sometimes it's more attractive to cling to those different things. But at the end of the day, as believers, we're supposed to know that it's not as life-giving as following Jesus is. Like, it's a daily discipline to kind of turn from those other things and to say, wait, I think there's something better out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Caleb, you were describing being a disciple, like being an athlete, which that's actually the way that Paul describes being a disciple of Jesus himself.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that verse in Corinthians, my main man, Paul.
Yeah, that's right. So 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24. This is kind of a wild passage, but this is how Paul describes living the Jesus life. He says, do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. And so here Paul is saying being a disciple of Jesus requires strict training, just like being a track athlete, right? It requires strict training. It requires discipline. And not only that, really rigorous discipline, training like you want to win the race.
Yeah. And it is in our best interest to do this. I know personally, I feel closer to God when I am following him, when I am pursuing his answers for how I should live, things that I should do, being rooted deeper in his word and making decisions that I know that Jesus would make. Especially when it comes to like loving others and even loving myself. And so while we are going to be like, we're telling students like they should be exerting themselves and working towards this and adding this to their lives, just know that it's because it's intentionally not a passive thing.
Yeah.
That Jesus knows what is best for us. And that there is like good to come from it.
Yeah, totally. Because I think that can sound really intimidating at first, but then the more I think about it, it's actually really freeing and encouraging to know that, hey, I can grow closer to Jesus. I actually can become more like him. So with that in mind, though, I want to bring it back to D groups, shall we? So one of the things we are going to be doing in our D groups, because of the TAPS acronym, is giving everybody each semester a different practice to work through, to learn about, to practice and to focus on. And that's because, like we learned through these passages, like we've been discussing today, we really believe that being a disciple of Jesus takes practice. So we want to give everybody different practices to work on, so that we can work at it and work at living and loving more like Jesus.
Yeah, and these are practices that Christians through the centuries have talked about and practiced themselves and said, yeah, this is a way that we have collectively learned to grow closer to Jesus in our everyday life. And so that's what we're bringing to you, is a lot of these ancient practices from around the globe, from around church history, so that you can participate in that movement. And yes, there will also be some homework, which I don't mean to trigger you, but there will be homework. But yes, but that's because we should expect that, right?
Yeah.
The Christian life, I mean, just looking at these passages that you brought up, it takes work. We should expect that if being a student takes work in school, then being a student of Jesus should take work. It takes homework. That's what it's always taken to follow Jesus.
Yes, we're saying it's homework, boo, but like also it's homework in the sense that you're kind of always learning. You're supposed to be anyway. You're always going to be a student. If you think about lawyers and doctors, they do 4 years in undergrad like everybody else, and then they do sometimes 6 to 10 more years of school. And then after they do that, they go and start their own practice, their own medical practice, their own law practice. They stay rooted. They if you've ever seen a doctor, they have bookshelves full of books that they are still reading, that they still have to reference in order to know how to go and take care of other people's needs.
Yeah.
It's not said and done at the end. It's something that they're still working through. That's kind of their lifestyle. You know, it's their way of living, which makes me think that in Acts, the first Christians were considered it's mentioned 6 times that they were practicing the way, right? This is new way of living, this new lifestyle. And we want our students to think about the fact that this is a way of living, similar to like how doctors and lawyers go to school for all this time, to live this way. We want them to be rooted and to be studying the Bible and studying Jesus and learning more and wanting to, because this is kind of like their calling, you know? This is like their primary calling.
Yeah, right.
I think that's great. And even you saying that doctors and lawyers, their line of work and their businesses that they open are called practices. I really love that you pointed that out, because it's also, they're called practices, not perfects, if you will. Forgive the pun or joke, but like really that is helpful, because then it makes me realize like, oh, there's not an expectation of perfection of, oh, you already have it figured out and we're done. It's like, no, it's an expectation of continually practicing and just showing up and being faithful and doing it over and over again. Not an expectation of perfection, but really of just continually practicing.
Right.
Great.
Yes. Good. Yeah. And that's, we always want to bring it back to the gospel. Jesus is the perfection, right? But he invites us into these practices so that we become more and more like him. And I think something that I might have thought in high school is, okay, I'm going to get to that later. I'll start the way of Jesus later. Right now, I've got to focus on getting to college or saving up for a car or whatever. And those are, you should do those things. Those are good. But also, to your point about this being our main vocation, like it's really important actually that you start these practices now.
Absolutely.
So I think of they say rocket scientists, when they're making calculations for a rocket, let's say it's going to the moon, if they're 1% off, then that rocket is going to be 1,000 miles away from the moon at the end of the day. And high school is a time like that. You are forming practices and habits right now that you're going to have with you for the rest of your life. I mean, your brain is very malleable right now. So what you do right now is really, really important. And we want some of these things to be built into your life so that they become second nature. They become things you don't even have to think about, like brushing your teeth, right? So brushing your teeth takes 4 minutes a day. Hopefully, if you're doing it dentist recommended way, 2 minutes a day in the morning and then and at night. But if you didn't brush your teeth for the next 10 years, what would the consequences be? They'd be bad. You have no friends. Right. I mean, I would be your friend, even if you had no teeth, Caleb. But
that's kind.
It wouldn't be good, right? So the same thing with these practices. We want these practices to become such a part of your daily habit that, they might be things that you don't even think about now, but they have long-term good results for your flourishing in the future.
Yeah. I think this is all really helpful, and it's encouraging. It's also pretty convicting. Yeah. So I'm kind of circling back to the original question, like how can we say that all this is true, that being a disciple of Jesus takes a lot of hard work? And that is true. What we've just seen from these passages, from the analogies we're using, that is true. How do we balance that and hold that intention in tandem with also the truth that we can't be saved by our works, that the gospel is a free gift that we can't earn, that we can't earn by doing good works? So how do we hold those intentions? Like being a disciple is hard work. The gospel is a free gift.
Yeah, that's a good question.
What do we do with that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we're going to get to it in our next session.
Right on.
So,
I like it.
So join us as we explore that next week, and we'll see you next time.